Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Horror Mine. My name is Vic Shy, and this is the Scare Score, where I break down horror movies and rate them on how scary I think they are. In this episode, I'll be going over the 2016 horror film, The Autopsy of Jane Doe. The film tells the story of a father and son performing an autopsy on a mysterious woman whose corpse was found buried underneath a house. They begin to uncover disturbing things throughout their autopsy, and things go horribly wrong. I'll be going over the events that take place throughout the film, while our Scare Score goes up or down based on how effective the scares are or attempt to be. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Raid Shadow Legends is an exciting free-to-play turn-based MMORPG available on all mobile devices. Raid offers nearly 700 unique champions with truly awesome designs to choose from. There are plenty of reasons to play Raid, but here are the top 3 reasons in my opinion. Raid offers some truly unique designs for all of their champions. I love the creativity that goes into the character designs and makes pulling for champions so much more enjoyable. Speaking of pulling for champions, I absolutely love opening shards to get new characters. The animation for opening shards is absolutely awesome and feels totally fulfilling. Nothing feels quite like opening a sacred shard and gaining an awesome and powerful champion to join your team. That brings me to the graphics. Raid's graphics are amazing for a mobile game. The impressive in-game graphics make it so much more enjoyable and make the experience that much more immersive. This month, Raid has a special Valentine's Day event, Raid Love Quest. Just download Raid Shadow Legends using the links below, copy your in-game player ID, and head to raidlovequest.plarium.com. Enter your player ID and set out on this heartfelt quest that runs from February 14th to March 14th. Play Valentine's Day themed minigames for a chance to win some fantastic in-game and real-life prizes, including Valentine's Day themed Raid champions and even Amazon gift cards worth up to $1,000. If you're an existing Raid player, use promo code STValentine23 that everyone can use to get a small Valentine's gift. Also, make sure to click my link in the description or scan my QR code here on screen to receive unique bonuses worth $30, including the free Epic Champion Konoru and other useful items. The Autopsy of Jane Doe is a very underrated horror movie, but how scary is it? Sit back and relax and join me as we explore the Autopsy of Jane Doe and tally up the Scare Score. Our movie begins in Grantham, Virginia, as the police are investigating the scene of a family that was brutally murdered in their home. The scene is absolutely chaotic as bodies are spread throughout the house with stab and gunshot wounds. Sheriff Burke is called down to the basement where the body of a young woman is found partially buried in the ground. The woman has no identification and isn't related to the murdered family.
Well, for now, she's a Jane Doe.
One of the deputies says that there were no signs of anyone breaking in. In fact, it appears as if they were trying to break out. We meet our main characters, father and son Austin and Tommy Tilden. Austin is portrayed by Emil Hirsch and Tommy is brilliantly portrayed by Brian Cox. The father and son duo own the Tilden family morgue that has been in the family for generations. Being a movie with autopsy in the name, we see a lot of graphic things throughout, most of which I won't be able to show for obvious reasons. Tommy is very knowledgeable and passionate about his work and tries passing this on to his son. Austin clearly loves his dad but doesn't seem as passionate about their line of work. While Austin finishes the autopsy, Tommy goes out for a smoke and we see that the morgue is located directly beneath their home. Austin hears a noise coming from the vents, which turns out to be their cat Stanley. He hears another noise coming from the hallway and gets spooked by his girlfriend Emma in a fake-out jump scare. Emma checks out the morgue for the first time and wants to see her first dead body. Spoiler alert, she gets to become one of them later in the film. Austin is reluctant to show her a body, saying that there are some things you just can't unsee. Having seen numerous dead bodies in my line of work, I can definitely agree with that statement. They show her the body of a man who was shot in the face at point blank. There is a bell attached to his ankle that Tommy says is to make sure he's dead, something that will obviously be used as a scare instrument later on. Seeing a dead body isn't as cool as she thought it would be and rightfully spooks her. As Austin walks her out, Sheriff Burke arrives with a Jane Doe Doe's body. Austin and Emma have plans to go see a movie, and Tommy says that he can do the autopsy on his own. Austin feels bad for leaving his father alone and thinks that this autopsy may be important. We learn he is planning on leaving Tommy to live with Emma but hasn't told his father yet. He convinces Emma to come back in a couple of hours, by which time they should be done with the autopsy and they can go out for a night they'll never forget. But this is a horror movie and not a rom-com.
God damn it, what do you want?
The Notebook.
I fell asleep 5 minutes in.
They unveil the woman's corpse, which gets a growl out of Stanley. Sheriff Burke says that the autopsy must be done tonight. He is looking for a cause of death that might explain the mysterious circumstances around her death. While Tommy narrates the beginning of the autopsy, we hear the radio say that there will be beautiful weather for the next few days. This information is brief but very important to note. They perform an external examination on her body and note that there are no visible signs of injuries or bruising.
Eyes. Gray?
Both of her eyes appear ghoulishly gray, and her facial expression makes it seem like she is alive. Her gaze is extremely haunting, and we will see her expression seemingly change throughout the film. They note that she has a small waist that doesn't seem to fit the rest of her body. They notice that both of her wrists and ankles are shattered, but there are no external signs reflecting that. They find peat underneath her nails, toenails, and inside of her hair as if she was buried in it. Tommy says that peat is a type of soil most commonly found up north, not in Virginia. They open her mouth and find that her tongue has been severed. Tommy says that this is similar to a human trafficking incident from 15 years ago. Tommy pulls a piece of thread out of her mouth and they discover that she has several cuts in her vaginal canal. The autopsy gradually gets weirder and more disturbing, but they still cannot figure out her mysterious cause of death. The radio turns on and a faint scream is briefly heard, followed by the song "Open Up Your Heart" by the McGuire sisters. I absolutely love this scare scene. It's nothing over the top, but it's absolutely chilling. They begin cutting into her and an abnormal amount of blood seeps out of her body, leaving them baffled. Austin takes a sample of her blood that mysteriously begins to overflow once he places it in the cooler. Tommy says that her waist seems as if she had been wearing a corset for a long period of time. Austin says that those went out of style hundreds of years ago, but he doesn't know what goes on in my bedroom every other Wednesday afternoon. They discover that her lungs are severely blackened, so much so that her body should be covered in third-degree burns. The longer the autopsy goes on, they discover more disturbing and unexplainable things. I get absolute chills every time the film focuses on her face, especially while she's being cut. All her major organs, including her heart, appear to have scars on them as if they had been cut. They say that with all her internal injuries, her body should be mangled beyond all recognition. However, she appears to be totally fine. Thunder strikes as the light begins to flicker ominously. They hear a noise in the hallway and Austin goes to investigate. As he searches for the noise, he sees a figure standing in the hallway through a mirror. However, there is no one actually standing there. Tommy continues the autopsy and cuts his wrist on one of her exposed ribs. The film once again zooms in on her face as if she was the one who intentionally cut him. They hear a noise coming from the vent and we get a fake-out jump scare, which turns out to be their cat, who is now seriously injured. In an emotional scene, Tommy puts poor Stanley out of his misery. He cremates the cat that obviously meant a lot to him. Austin goes back into the exam room and one of the body refrigerators opens on its own. Tommy reveals that Stanley was one of the last things that belonged to his wife after she passed. He then proceeds to turn into John Wick and murder everyone responsible for his cat's death. I don't really like that the film felt the need for Tommy to audibly tell the audience what the cat meant to him. This was already made pretty clear through the context of the scene. They cut open her stomach and pull out a flower called a Jimson weed, which is a paralyzing agent. Tommy says that the flower is found in the Northeast, which helps determine where she is possibly from. The weatherman on the radio says that the storm has become larger than anticipated, and Austin suggests continuing the autopsy in the morning. Tommy insists on finishing the autopsy and says that Austin can leave and go to Weenie Hut Jr. if he's too scared.
I was actually pointing to the place next to it.
Super Weenie Hut Jr.
They discover an odd piece of fabric inside of her stomach that was wrapped around one of her teeth. The fabric has an odd symbol on it surrounded by Roman numerals. Tommy becomes increasingly curious about her cause of death and why all of these horrible things happened to her. The man on the radio says that this is not a storm you want to get caught in and ominously says,
"One thing's for sure, you're not going anywhere."
As the music comes on the radio, they cut deeper into her skin and discover that numerous symbols have been drawn underneath her skin. The music on the radio intensifies and one of the lockers opens up before the lights burst, leaving them in total darkness. They hear a loud noise in the dark and see that all of the lockers are now open and empty. All of this is finally enough for Tommy to say, "Let's GTFO."
Let's get the fuck out of here.
The generator comes on, which provides a bit of light. They hear a loud crashing noise from above and learn that the large sycamore tree has fallen, leaving them trapped underneath. This is a horror movie, so you might as well completely smash your phone because you already know there's no signal. They hear a noise coming from the other end of the hall and retreat into the office. Tommy tries contacting Sheriff Burke through their landline but is unable to get through. There is a slight moment of silence before they hear the noise of a bell ringing in the hallway. The noise starts getting closer until it is right in front of the door. The body of the dead man is now a zombie and tries forcing its way inside. They place a cabinet to block the door and it eventually stops. Austin believes that Jane Doe is the cause of everything that's happening. He says that everything started to go wrong when they began cutting into her. Tommy goes to wash his wound and the curtain next to him slightly moves. Austin sees a shadow behind the curtain but there's no one there. They breathe a premature sigh of relief as the door quickly shuts and Tommy gets his ass absolutely handed to him by an unknown force. Tommy says that whoever attacked him had gray eyes just like Jane Doe. They find the corpse's bloody face covering on the ground, meaning that he's now displaying a literal headshot. They go back into the exam room and the Jane Doe somehow looks even more terrifying and menacing. Tommy wants to cremate her body but the door locks itself shut, trapping them inside. Austin grabs an axe and starts hacking at the door. He manages to make a small opening but it's not Johnny on the other side, it's a predictable jump scare. The creepy part is that the corpse just stays there, opens its mouth, and makes a weird noise. Austin says F it and douses her body in flammable liquid as Tommy pulls out a match and lights it like a badass. They light her on fire, which seems to have no effect other than quickly lighting almost the entire place on fire. The flames seem to light up just as fast as when the curious Chinese worker lit up an entire warehouse. Tommy must have a part-time job as a firefighter because he manages to put out those flames with a single fire extinguisher. The two men are in shock to discover that the flames had absolutely no effect on her body. The doors reopen and the pair make a run for the elevator. As they wait for the doors to open, they hear the sound of the bell as the corpse slowly makes its way towards them. Tommy remembers his past life as King Agamemnon and grabs the axe ready to put up a fight. They manage to get into the elevator but the power goes out yet again, leaving the doors partially open. The tension is extremely high the closer the corpse gets, especially thanks to the ringing of the bell. Right before it approaches the door, Tommy takes a swing and we hear the body fall to the ground. They hear a weak gurgling sound right outside the elevator and it turns out that Tommy tragically struck Emma with the axe. We didn't spend too much time with Emma, so there's no real emotional weight to this death, but it still sucks for Austin. It's now become clear that the Jane Doe can magically manipulate events into tricking Tommy and Austin. They have a heartfelt chat in the elevator where we learn that Austin's mother took her own life. Tommy blames himself for not having seen it coming and has bottled up his emotions about the incident ever since. The cremator lights up on its own and fills the hallways with smoke. Tommy and Austin decide to take one final stand and walk right into the smoke. They quickly get separated and Tommy gets brutalized once more. They eventually make it back into the exam room with Tommy seriously injured. They try and finish the autopsy to try and uncover what Jane Doe is desperately trying to hide. Her face now has a clear change in expression, showing that she isn't messing around. They cut into her skull and expose her brain.
It's okay.
Austin cuts a piece of her brain and examines it underneath a microscope. They make the shocking discovery that Jane Doe has actually been alive this entire time. She felt every single thing they did to her throughout the autopsy, which is an absolutely horrible thought. They re-examine the piece of fabric they found and discover a passage from the Bible, Leviticus 20:27. Any man or woman who consults the spirits of the dead shall be put to death, for they are a witch, and their blood shall be on their own hands. They also learn that the fabric is dated 1693 during the time of the Salem witch trials. Tommy says that none of the women accused of witchcraft during the trials were actual witches. All the women killed were innocent. He believes that Jane Doe was wrongfully tortured, which turned her into a powerful, vengeful entity as a result.
This is our revenge.
Jane Doe was the reason why the family in the beginning was found brutally murdered. She did to them exactly what she has been doing to Tommy and Austin. The corpses start breaking their way into the room and Tommy realizes that there's no way out. He tells Jane Doe that she can do whatever she wants to him but pleads with her to spare Austin. She seemingly agrees and Tommy begins to experience the exact same things that were done to her. He is painfully tortured as Jane Doe's body seemingly begins to heal itself, Wolverine style. Tommy pleads with Austin to put him out of his misery and he drives a scalpel right into his father's heart. The power comes back on and Austin hears the sheriff calling out to him from above. He hears the sound of sirens and the tree being removed from above the door. Austin tries opening the door, which still seems to be stuck from above. Burke repeatedly tells him to open up, but Austin yells out that he can't. In a heel turn just as shocking as when he betrayed House Stark at the Red Wedding, Burke begins to sing, revealing that Jane Doe pulled a fast one on Austin one last time.
Open up!
I can't.
Open up your heart.
Austin hears a bell ringing behind him and when he turns around is treated to one final jump scare by his dad's ghost. He falls backwards to his death, showing that Jane Doe had no intention of letting anyone survive. Sheriff Burke and the authorities finally arrive at the grisly scene. It is broad daylight and there are no signs of a storm ever happening. The radio mentions that today is the 4th straight day of sunshine, revealing that the storm never happened and was a result of Jane Doe playing tricks on them. Sheriff Burke orders Jane Doe to be removed from his county altogether, and we see that her body has fully healed back up. In the film's final scene, Jane Doe is being driven away in a van. The radio begins to play Open Up Your Heart as the camera shows Jane Doe being transported to her next victims as the movie ends. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was The Autopsy of Jane Doe. My friends, this was a very refreshing film with one of the more original horror movie plots I've seen in a while. This movie was creepy on a level I've not experienced too often. The atmosphere was creepy and mysterious the entire time, although I feel like the ending was a bit rushed and that the film sort of lost the creepy factor that it had done so well to build up in the beginning. Jane Doe herself was the creepiest thing about the film, even though she never moved or spoke. Her facial expressions gradually changing as the autopsy went on was absolutely brilliant. In conclusion, The Autopsy of Jane Doe had an original and fresh premise. There were plenty of good scares spread throughout, combined with a tremendously creepy and tense atmosphere, earning The Autopsy of Jane Doe a solid scare score of 66%. The scariest scene in the film is when Tommy and Austin were in the office and confronted by the Bell corpse. Their expression of shock combined with the absolute silence aside from the approaching Bell was very well played and made for a great scare scene. But as always, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you all for tuning in and I cannot wait to see y'all right back here in the Horror Mine. Y'all stick around.